Auditorium this morning, and we're now going to kick off the rest of our program. I'm so excited to have the caliber of speakers that we have on our program this morning. But perhaps more importantly, what I'm excited about is that you and I are going to get the opportunity to interrogate as well as dissect some of the initiatives and the actions that are already taking place in civil society, through business, through government, as well as various organizations and NGOs around the crisis that surrounds sanitation today. As said a little bit earlier on, we are here to contribute to a part of ideas, to impact, to innovation in this particular space, as well as tackling this challenge head on. The language around sanitation is something that you and I have historically and perhaps been socialized to stay away from. Nobody wants to talk about how important it is that we make the issue of sanitation a number one priority as we deal with the issues that surround the business of the number twos. And so we use these euphemisms as we've been socialized to speak amongst ourselves, and often at the expense of getting down to the dirty work, the hard work, the technical work and thinking that must go into dealing with the issues on the ground when it comes to making sure that hygiene, infection control, the education and awareness around sanitation is something that stays top of mind, irrespective of what corner of industry, government, or policy making we may occupy today. World Toilet Day, interestingly enough, was first commemorated as well as recognized in 2001, and only was declared by the UN as a day that was observed worldwide in 2013. So it was only 5 years ago that it became important to recognize that 4.5 billion people, what is that, ladies and gentlemen? An estimated 65% of the world's global population do not live with safe toilets 5 years ago. And so it's really encouraging to see our hosts today, Unilever, through their SLP, as well as their commitment to this, to the development goals, in particular development goal number 6, having taken strides to participate in this conversation long before this day was an internationally recognized day of observation. A third of schools right the way around the world do not provide any toilet facilities. Now, I didn't say don't have them, but simply do not provide them. And therefore, it is particularly important that we elevate this discussion and conversation, because the impact of not having these facilities is far-reaching. We take for granted what a young girl in a rural area without access to a toilet goes through during the 5 or 7 days when she menstruates. It is estimated that young girls, not just in South Africa, but right the way around the African continent, miss 25 to 30% of the school year simply because in each of their schools, toilets facilities, clean, dignified sanitary conditions are simply not provided. It also goes then to say infection control in our schools becomes a massive crisis. If there is no water and no provision of facilities to use not only for sanitary reasons, but then also accompanying infrastructure, water being perhaps the most important in the school environment, it stands to chance that nearly 1 billion children right the way around the world simply never learn to wash their hands, simply as a result of not ever having confronted a tap, an available tap, with running water, and then similarly with nobody who can actually teach them about the importance of rubbing their hands properly and making sure that they have clean, hygienic hands to touch food, to interact and play with others, and to carry on with their days. The conversation around sustainability has not ever also been one that traditionally has been impacted by the issues of sanitation. And it's only in recent times, particularly as we've dealt with energy crises, that everybody has started to say, well, what's in biogases? And where else would biogas come from but from biological waste? And therefore now the conversation is working itself back to saying, well, if you do collect biogas and bio waste, where are you collecting it from? And do the people who ultimately provide it to you to fix a solution somewhere else do so in a way that still restores their dignity, and do so in a way that will not in any way harm or even kill them in many instances? As you watched the Domestos video earlier on, you saw a lot of very happy, clean faces, happy to receive education, so entertained and engaged by the information that they're receiving. But I cannot imagine what those happy little faces go through on a daily basis before a large corporate or a product like Domestos arrives in their schools to impart that knowledge, to impart those skills, and to deliver much needed infrastructure. So the Cleaner Toilets, Brighter Future campaign, which you saw a little bit of and you're going to hear a little bit about, as well as the ancillary programs that support everyone in a schooling system, from principals all the way to janitors, become more and more important, but perhaps more importantly, become more and more effective in driving down the numbers around infection controls, in driving down the numbers about a lack of access, and in driving down the numbers related to deaths and incidents and accidents that happen in our schools. As you came in, you might have noticed the pledge wall, and I had an opportunity a little bit earlier to sit on the throne, as it were, and write my pledge down. The first pledge that I've already made today is to say, how do I get professionals in the space I work in when I'm not on stage, the built environment, to begin to meaningfully discuss, but also meaningfully begin to contribute through our skills, our access to materials, as well as our access to unreachable parts of this country, to first address sanitation as part of our design and the construction of the facilities that all of us are involved in. That was my pledge. And each of you are in spaces where I know you can do something. So believe me when I say it's important that we collect that information and we assist Unilever and Domestos to help us join the dots. Because as we join the dots, you and I become valuable contributors to a value chain that contributes to sustainability, but also to creating effective remedies to the crisis around sanitation today. I would at this point also like to welcome our guests who are live streaming into our event this morning. And these are the people around South Africa and around the world who are as committed, but are also as interested in participating in the dialogue, as well as the engagements that you and I will have here today. So welcome to all of them at home, in their offices, and in the different spaces where they are streaming from. And we certainly hope to hear your voices through the questions you will ask, the statements that you'll make, as well as some of the case studies that you are currently working on and engaging. Our first guest speaker this morning is a woman who probably needs no real introduction, having spent the last 16 years in our cars, in our living rooms, in our digital platforms, as well as South Africa's media industry. Not only delivering award-winning content and shows on radio and television, but also being a passionate advocate about many of the issues that matter to you and I today. Not only is she a personality behind the mic as well as the camera, she's also a businesswoman, a social commentator on the things that count, and a mom to a 3-year-old personality of his own, the younger Alake. As part of this year's World Toilet Day build-up, many of you who listen to Anele's show and follow Anele on various digital platforms have already begun to hear her speak about the crisis related to sanitation in the country today. And she has partnered in so many meaningful ways with the Domestos team already, as they have embarked on a journey like no other. And today, I certainly hope that she will take us a little bit through her lived experience of what she has seen as she looks at ways that she, as an individual, as well as the different places that she impacts, can help us address and turn around the crisis around sanitation today. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to the stage the Domestos Campaign Ambassador, Ms. Anele Mdoda.
Thank you so much, Lynette. You're doing a wonderful job. Halfway through your speech, I'm like, why am I here again? Why doesn't Lynette just do all of this? Absolutely wonderful. My name is Anele Mdoda, and I am the Domestos Ambassador for World Toilet Day for 2018. First things first, I'd like to say thank you so much to Unilever for putting this together, but also carrying on with it. I mean, like they say, they started the initiatives from 2010 already. In Xhosa, there's a saying called umlilo amaphepha. Yeah, the people who know what I'm talking about nods. And my mom always used to say that to me. Anele, andifuna umlilo wamaphepha. It means a fire that's been made by paper. Because what it happens with it is it burns quickly, and it burns bright, and it's hot, right? But it dies. In 5 minutes, it's gone, right? And what I like about Unilever and Domestos is that abawenzi umlilo wamaphepha. That's not something that they do. From 2010, all they've done is put more effort, more money, more thoughts, more networking around World Toilet Day. And for that, I think we should give them a round of applause. And I mean, we're all gathered here because of them. So what I want to talk about is something that I know for a fact that Unilever and ultimately Domestos is all about, is experiences. Because many things can grow a person, but ultimately experiences are the kind of growth that you're always looking towards. Because Unilever has got many brands under them, sometimes the experiences are you and 4 girls can go to New York City and you can shop, win a competition, we'll take you there, and you come back. That's an experience. And that's an important experience to have because life is all about a balancing act. When it comes to this experience is when I was 6 years old, I was in a school in the Eastern Cape called Excelsior. There's a video that's going to play. It will unpack a lot of that, so I won't delve too much into it. But in 1 year, I was in a school where the sanitation was terrible. And then in the very next year, we moved to Pretoria, where the sanitation was absolutely amazing. Just the facilities themselves at the school were amazing. And those two experiences are really different, but ultimately they build who I am. Now, many of us, even in our old age, I know today we speak about kids, but many of us, even now, we're living 2 different experiences. We have a parallel existence, yet the one never speaks to the other one. Many of us work in corporate. You wake up and we all meet at the office, and by the time we're walking into the office, we have one language. Yes, we're talking about work. Yes, we can talk about social things. But even then, I feel that our language is one. Everyone leaves their houses as something, and in their cars, in their taxis, in their buses, you are unselfing yourself, if that's a word. I can make one up right now, where you are becoming less and less of yourself just so you can get to work to fit in, so you don't stand out, you don't stick out, you don't ruffle any feathers. And this is why we'll walk through the carousels and you'll see the pictures of the current state of 3,800 schools in South Africa of what toilets look like. And you can be shocked. You're shocked because you don't know about it, and you're shocked because we don't talk about it. You're shocked because when we come together, you forget who you are. You dilute yourself so that when you get to a place, you don't make people feel uncomfortable. We have to be uncomfortable. There is nothing comfortable about the fact that there are children in this country who walk into a toilet and there is feces on the floor. There is urine on the floor. They need to navigate with school shoes that they already don't have. Many drives, let's raise school shoes, million school shoes for kids without school shoes. Now, they already didn't have school shoes. Now they must take those same school shoes and they must navigate their way to go and wee. In that, 3,800 schools in the country don't have proper sanitation. You must remember that there are girl children going to school, right? And they say themselves that they hold it in. Abaya toilet, they would rather hold it in, and when they go home, to no more glamorous situations when it comes to sanitation, but at least they know that there, it's at home, and they can do their business. They hold it in, therefore causing bladder infections. How does an 11-year-old girl know that she's got a bladder infection? In her mind, I just have a sore tummy, or mama, it's just sore here. It's a bladder infection caused by the fact that there's no proper sanitation. Lynette was saying that, they don't go to the toilet once a day, 6, 7 times. Think to yourself, if you had to hold your wee in 6 times during a day. But you have got the pleasure of experience, the fact that no, I can't hold pee in, let me go. But once again, you've got the pleasure that you can just go somewhere, you sit down, and you wee. We need to talk about our parallel existences. We need to talk about the fact that if I go to the Eastern Cape, I land in Umtata, there's an airport, great. If I didn't drive down, I must hire a car. I go to Avis, I get into a car, great. I drive on Todd Road, great. I go to groceries because I know that I'm going to what I would say to you is the farm, but either way, who says Lalin, I'm going to the rural areas, right? Great. And I'm driving, and as I'm going there, I'm a person who woke up in Bryanston, but I'm a person who goes to bed in Lembu. And I need to talk about that when I get to work. Uba, we got home and we did this and we slaughtered this for this person because this is currently happening to them. We're either celebrating them, we're either cleansing them, there is some sort of ritual that is happening. That is not something that you must keep to you and yourselves. That is something that everybody must know about. To your colleagues, yes, they may be white, but they need to learn about us. You can't leave your home as a black person and get into work and be something else, because this is why when these toilets are being shown, we all get surprised. We need to talk about the fact that when I go to Eastern Cape in Limbu, yes, whilst there is a toilet inside the house that my dad has built over the years because he knew where he grew up, sometimes it doesn't work. That's why there is a long drop at the bottom of the garden. And at night, sometimes, at 2 o'clock, Anele must wake up, and if I need to wee, if I didn't put a bucket there where I can wee, and then I'll take that urine out and throw it out in the morning, I must put on my tackies, and I must walk a good 40 meters to the bottom of the garden, where I must pass cows and sheep and goats, and I must wee or poo, and then I must walk back. That is how I live sometimes. That is my parallel existence. And that's why I can derive power from it. A lot of people will ask, how do you always know what to say? How are you always so funny? How are you always on point with what comes out your mouth? It's because of my parallel existence. I don't shy away from it. So when I say something in my head, I've said it in Xhosa already, and then I just translate it into English. Therefore, it's a direct translation, which is where the humor would come from. Now, I can explain that to you, but the best way you can feel it is in the experience of hearing me talk. But it's because I don't shy away from who I am. So in this quest for us to make sure that those 3,800 schools get the sanitation, you can't just do it as umlilo wamaphepha, that fire of paper, once off and you're out. Give us your 500 and you're out. Give of yourself in money, yes, but also give of your story. Because the more you tell your story, the more the next person is used to hearing it. The more they acclimatize to it, the more they're accepting. Because you need to remember something. What we're discussing here is poverty, to be fair. We're discussing poverty. And South Africa is a poor country, right? So poverty also is a difficult discussion to have because people don't like to talk about money. But the more we speak about it, the easier we make it for everyone else to hear. We have a problem. Children in this country do not have proper sanitation. We are going to need money for it. It is not a government problem. It's not a Domestos problem. It's not a me problem. It is an everyone problem. So I would like for everyone to come to the forefront. Because by owning your story is the only way you know how to take it forward. Owning the story, sharing it, and making it an our story. I'll use an example of a lady called Tato. She started the Ritaka Foundation. How she owned her parallel existence was the fact that she grew up in a shack, right? Before that, her mother also grew up in a shack. She says that her mother would have had the most amazing maths mark because the mother was smart. But she could never go forward because at the beginning of the week, her mother would give her a candle and say, this candle must burn for the entire week. So when you do your homework, do it and know that tomorrow you still need this candle to drive you all the way to Friday. So that's why her maths mark wasn't amazing. because she could never practice maths. Tato, same thing. Luckily, their school did some fundraising thing and they all got torches with batteries and they could have their lives in there. So therefore, she could practice her maths. And she took herself out of that situation that they were in. Cut to 8 years later, Tato has literally invented this bag, right? This bag has got a solar light inside it. And it's made out of reusable material that they use for billboards. So they make these bags and then they put the solar light inside and they give it to school kids who live in shacks where they don't have electricity. When you go to school, this bag charges because of the sun, right? You're at school and you get homework, you get home. Whilst the sun is still out, you can do your work. When the sun rises, it's dark. What does the child do? Take her light out, gah! Does her maths, does her English, does her geography. Now, if Tato was scared of her story, if Tato was scared of the fact that she grew up in a shack, if that was something that Tato would go to work, wherever she was working, and not relay, and not talk about it, and not let other people hear it, we would never have those bags. But now we do. So today, all I'm asking you is talk about yourself. In a non-vain way, obviously. After about 10 minutes, now you know that now you're crossing the line. Come on. But talk about yourself. Those stories that you feel are painful, the stories you feel you know no one wants to hear it. At times, yes, there's humor to them. But at times, if you went to bed and all you ate was sand so you guys can fill your stomach, that is something that the country needs to hear. That is something that the kids need to hear. My mother used to say, there's no new problems, you are new to the problem. So if you have a problem and you speak about it, you'll find that the person who you're talking to actually came up with a solution for it 15 years ago. They've been through it. They're now onto their 10th problem in life, and they could just give you what you need for it to carry on. So the beauty here is Domestos and Unilever have identified the problem. They have the numbers. By the end of this year, we want to have raised 1.1 million so we can build sanitation in 2 schools, right? But by the end of 2019, we want to make it 500 schools. We've already started. I've pledged money, so has Domestos. I spoke about it on the radio show this morning. My dad called me and said, because my dad's got a running joke, he always asks me, when am I getting a real job? I've done this for 16 years, he still doesn't think it's a real job. And when he heard me speaking about this morning, he was like, finally, you get a real job. So he also says that he's willing to give 10,000 Rand. I don't know how much you've raised at the moment, but I'm glad to know. Thank you. I don't know how much you've raised at the moment, but I'm just glad to know that, I've even got other companies calling and saying, what do we need to do? But for me, and I was saying it earlier, that, 10 companies can come and say, here's 100,000 Rand. And I love that, and I'm not going to turn it away because ultimately Unilever, Domestos, and myself, we have a goal, right? And it's got nothing to do with us, but it's got to do with the children. But I would also appreciate 100 people giving 100 Rand because that is the social cohesion that we need. That if you say, Mna, I don't have money, can't deny 5 Rand, I'd like that 5 Rand as well. Because ultimately, when those little children are going to a toilet and it's flushing, because it just doesn't end at the fact that it's a pit toilet. Here's the thing, in your mind you think, yeah, it's just a pit toilet, but you will see a video. There are times when the toilets are there, the tiles are shiny, the porcelain bowl nayo, but now the piping underneath is what causes for there to be a flood of poo. This is why she has to navigate her way to a toilet a few times a day. Just the plumbing itself is also an issue. We need to eradicate the entire thing. So even if you're saying, I am just this person, I only have this, that too is very welcome. Because when those 3,800 schools are done, we're gonna find another mountain to climb, I understand that. But when those 3,800 schools are done and they've got proper sanitation, your 10 Rand did that. Before I wrap up, I'm going to say 2 words to you. Lumkamthetho. The child who died in a pit toilet this year. I was listening to her mother speak on ENCA this morning, and she was like, yeah, you know, we still haven't found closure. Duh. How do you find closure when your child died in a toilet? One of my biggest fears is for Alaka to drown in a pool. I'm so pedantic. Yo, if there's a pool around, there must be a net. If there's no net, we're not going to that house. Because just that thing of water filling his lungs while he's thinking, where's my mother? And now the child left to go to school in the morning, and she dies in a pit toilet. Yeah, guys, we have to do better. We have to do better. And today, I'm just asking you, please come on this journey with me. Thank you. In Umtata, I was in a school called Top School. We were very strong on academics, very strong. And then we moved to Pretoria. There's a pool with lanes, and there's a field with the lanes, and there's a library, my word. I remember I dread a lot having to go to the bathroom.
I just want you to have a look at this for our next segment.
So what state of mind do we expect from somebody who has to go relieve themselves in a space like this? It can't be that. It can't be that. It can't. No, no, no.
Hi, my name is Nozi Ponkelem. Can you imagine using a toilet like this?
Oh my God, she's right there in those toilets. Because now I can almost smell it. Please show me your feet. So you walk there, ne?
Yes.
Do you avoid going to the toilet?
Sometimes you can't avoid going to the toilet. When you have to go, you have to go. Would you go here?
No, I wouldn't.
Why wouldn't you come to a place like this?
I don't think anyone should go there. Oh, sure. You know, the first thing I thought is, whose child must use these toilets? And then right after that, I thought, I prayed to God and all my might that my son never has to. And I'm just like, what do I need to do to make sure that my son never has to?
You know, ladies and gentlemen, the hardest part about today is bringing energy to a topic that is so difficult to imagine and to almost muster some form of courage to face. And normally when we're gathered at forums and events of this nature, we need energy in a room. We need to keep it dynamic and interactive. But up until you've watched those interviews, as Anele has already told us her experience, and then you watch that video, somebody's child walking through fresh feces, and they do that not once a day, perhaps a few times a day, because when you have to go, you have to go. Where do we find the energy? Where do we find humor? Where do we find dynamic nature in ourselves and our souls and our minds to meet a challenge so devastating and in so many instances so deadly? So, ladies and gentlemen, what are we going to do? What are we going to contribute? How are we going to change this narrative for millions of young children in our South Africa, in this nation that you and I are so proud of, are so proud to have come from, so proud to continue to build, but also have to face the realities in it and the many realities that it breeds. Anele has already made a pledge of 10,000 Rand to a crowdfunding initiative she started when the technicalities on one side got a little bit tough. Anele said, I'll step in and I'll start something. The video that you've just seen behind us has already been watched by just over 200,000 people around the country, and I certainly hope around the world. Domestos has matched Anele's 10,000 Rand, and we've already got a consumer who has also made a contribution this morning. And I'm not sure if those statistics are continuing, but I'll keep getting live updates today. Anele said today, even if you've got 5 Rand, and that's the 5 Rand you know you've got, you can throw it in and it will begin to make the difference. So on the strength of her sentiment around it, I'm going to throw in 5,000 Rand. And I'm going to challenge each of you in the room, as our audience today, to match my 5,000 Rands as a starting point. Because if we can just walk out with another 5,000 Rands today, that's 50,000 Rand. And hopefully by tomorrow morning, people will have had the opportunity to think about it and to keep adding and going. Our target, ladies and gentlemen, is 1.1 million Rand. And our target is to be able to impact at least 3 schools through this crowdfunding initiative. And even if we do not get to 1.1 million Rand, the renovation of at least 2 out of the 3 schools that have been identified will continue. So the work will still be done. But what I'm asking each of you today is take from what you have and where you are to help us reach that target and to help us reach a point where we can say we gathered here today on World Toilet Day in 2018 and we actually did something about it. So, will anybody match my 5,000 Rand? Anele's dad has just matched his daughter's 10,000 Rand offline. I've got somebody in the audience who'd match my 5,000 Rand. Thank you. Oh, yes, you may. Please, can I have a roving mic for Rachel? I can hear her, but the people on the extremities in the room may not.
My name is Rachel Imasiku. I work for a company called Norcross South Africa. We're better known for our retail brand, Tile Africa. We have been in discussion with Domestos about this project, and for the 1.1 million, we will go 50-50 with them for the school.
So that is a commitment of?
550,000 Rands.
550,000 Rand. 50%. Oh my. Dale, thank you very much. Good morning.
We're going to match your challenge, and we challenge all the other agencies that we work with to come to the party.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you too, sir. 5,000 Rand matched at the front. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to just about 600,000 this morning in 3 minutes. Imagine how much more we're going to do in 30 minutes and in 3 hours from here. You want to give more? Yes, you may. Can you have a roving mic? It's behind you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Smile, and I wanted to just speak about something. You know, we speak about hygiene and sanitation, and we say 3,800 schools, but just to understand what that means, 3,800 schools, especially rural schools, means 3.8 million learners, on an average of about 1,000 a school, right? And if you take that figure of just under 4 million, and you say these children have homes with maybe 2 family members, and it automatically goes up to like 10, 11 million, what this means that it's not, I'm a dentist by profession, and this is not just a toilet issue. Please understand that if there's no sanitation, no water, if they cannot wipe properly, right, their hands are dirty. if their hands are dirty and they have to eat, they transfer all of that to their system from the inside. So this impacts a lot more in terms of health issues, in terms of poisoning. It's not just about a toilet issue. So if we start thinking a lot wider, we understand why something like this is so important. And then it still gets taken home and gets shared with everybody. So it really magnifies very quickly. And I definitely think there are a lot of solutions we can incorporate. But if our minds all, there's a proverb just outside on that wall that says doing things together. There's no doubt that we can improve the reality of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much to everybody online and offline who has joined us in those pledges this morning. We're already just over. Good morning. Pardon? Oh, we're done with the pledge? No, we're not done with the pledges, and we'll do them all day. But how much? There's a roving mic in front of you, sir.
Rocky Malabo from a company called Amalulu. We manufacture dry sanitation system with concrete. So we will donate 20 toilets for 5 schools.
20 toilets
For 5 schools, meaning it will be 100.
A construction company donating 20 toilets for 5 schools. Thank you very much for that. And thank you. There's a gentleman behind him still.
Hello again, Brian Lewis
Hello,
from
Brian.
Envirosan. We'll sponsor brand new toilets for every single one of those 3 schools from Envirosan.
Envirosan, a brand new toilet for every one of the schools we've spoken about.
No,
this
however many toilets are in that school, those 3 schools, we will donate that.
Those 3 schools that we've spoken about this morning.
Brand new
Thank
toilets
you
for
very
those.
much. I've got another hand in the air in the corner next to the tech desk. Thank you very much. I almost don't want to stop this energy, right?
Hi, everybody. Lee Augustus from the Niche Guys, the advertising agency. We'd like to donate 20,000 towards the fund.
Thank you very much, sir. 20,000 Rand. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to the screens to my left and the right, you can see the Thunder Fund details and account details. Kirsten is in the room. She is just waving her hand from the back now. If you would like to talk to her, she will also help us with the particulars around this crowdfunding initiative. I'm going to take a final hand. It's just been raised through the middle of the room. A roving mic. The gentleman, oh, I've got another hand as well. A final 2 hands. Yes, sir.
Good day to everyone. My name is Sizo Mavuso. I'm from a company called IMA. We just developed a water harvesting system that turns your gray water into water that could be used for your irrigation, but mainly focus at flushing of toilets. It's worth about 5,000 Rand. We'd like to donate it to 1 school and see how it goes from there.
All right, a pilot project with the products that you've already got on the market. Thank you very much. And a final hand from the lady in the yellow top. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Totally a very different way because it's a value chain. My company is Touchwork Africa. I'm going to donate about 25 sachets, 30, to put in homes near the schools, toilets. You just don't need plumbing or anything so that they can save water and then it goes back. That will be about 30 times 10 times 5.
So it's about 15,000.
150 liters saving of water every day.
Okay.
In those 30 homes, which will spell to, again, 150 times 30, 450 liters. And therefore, through that value chain, it would go back to giving dignity, even if it's washing hands for the kids. And I think I would like to encourage the Domestos Unilever to partner with Touchwork Africa, because we are saving 2 liters of water with every flush, with the current toilets, with every single flush. And we are very constrained with water. So I'll see the lady to receive the sachets and how they'll be delivered, and show her how they'll be put. Longevity of those sachets is over 3 years.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate it. Thank you very much to everybody this morning who has already begun to make an impact. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Anele back to the stage. But accompanying her this morning is a panel of guests who we are going to discuss at a little bit of length what it actually means to partner for sanitation success today. We've already started this conversation about holding each other's hands, but I think it's really important as part of today's program that we look at case studies, we understand the dynamics, the frustrations, the challenges, but also begin to see the opportunities and the roadmap that has been set by numerous stakeholders in this particular space. And perhaps as we leave here today, we will all see that the collaborative power of communicating, of pooling together our resources as well as our skills to create holistic solutions is possible, is real, and is ready for us to start and embark on a journey together now. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can please call to the stage Ms. Anele Mdoda, back again to the stage, Ms. Elete Pumachaba, who is the Unilever South Africa's Home Care Vice President, Dr. Granville Whittle, if he can also join us, he is the Director General in the Department of Basic Education, Mr. Sanjay Wijasekera. He's going to tell us how to pronounce that surname. But if Sanjay can also please join us on stage from UNICEF. Mr. Soli Mafoko, I know I saw him a little bit earlier on. He's the Chief Director from the Department of Basic Education's Infrastructure Directorate. If he can also join us on stage, and he's my final panelist, and I'm going to now take a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Mafoko makes his way to the stage, on each of your tables, you will notice that there is a card. On your tables, a branded card with lines on it. We encourage you to please use these cards to make your notes, to pose your questions. We will make sure that they are collected. If you can just put your hand up if you have a question, and somebody will collect it from the table, and make sure that we address some of your concerns from the stage this morning. Good morning to my panel, and please, ladies and gentlemen, please give them a very warm round of applause for joining us this morning. The Sanitation Appropriate for Education, the SAFE initiative, was launched by the President in August of this year, and specifically wants to address the issues of indignity, discomforts, as well as danger that pit latrines and a lack of adequate sanitation facilities in our schools poses to our society today. Schools should be places where young people feel safe, supported, nurtured, but perhaps empowered. But when we start by stripping them of their dignity, these imperatives cannot be achieved. So the SAFE initiative, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard this morning and have possibly read as well as you listened to various media briefs and did your own independent research, you know and understand that it exceeds the bounds of bricks and mortar and the actual construction of toilets, but also begins to look at a value chain that looks at everything from disease and infection control to sustainability. We've spoken about water, but also begins to look at livelihoods as we consider how the impacts of a lack of sanitation go on to impact a young person far beyond their childhood years, but well into a future. We've heard the stories about the deaths in our toilets. We've looked at the dangers that young people face on a daily basis as we look at the videos on the board. And certainly for me, one of the most distressing things to read and look at, and Mr. Mafoko, your department in particular has done a lot of work in terms of auditing just how many schools don't have facilities at the moment. And the numbers are frightening. And we heard this morning as a comment from one of our guests already that we look at 3,800 schools without facilities, and the impact of that and the ripple effect of that doesn't just impact 10 million learners, it exceeds communities, and it may in fact now impact more than half of South Africa's population as we look at the entire value chain. So, ladies and gentlemen, some of the things we begin to look at is the issues that up to 7,000 schools have toilets that are not appropriate right the way around the country, and 2,000 schools don't have toilets at all. And that in itself is really the dark depth of the crisis that the country faces today. Now, my esteemed panel of guests this morning come from various organizations. So when we talk about a multidimensional approach to the crisis as well as the priorities, whether the priority is infrastructure, investments in looking at turning this crisis around, as well as looking at policy and how we influence the different spheres and spaces. Each of our panel members today are leaders as well as policymakers and drivers in each of those spaces today. So I've promised them that this morning we're going to go straight to the hard parts and straight to the questions. But I will certainly make sure that they each have an opportunity to showcase some of the work that they're involved in, and also some of the challenges in the systems that they work in, that they have already confronted, so that we can walk away from this panel feeling as though there is a cohesive roadmap amongst partners to ensuring sanitation success. So I'm going to start specifically with you, Dr. Granville Whittle. And you come from the and you come from the Department of Basic Education, and specifically from the Care and Support Directorate. Now, the Care and Support Directorate runs quite a number of the priority projects of the Department of Basic Education, particularly if we look at the health program, we look at the deworming program, and we also look at the schools nutrition program. And now, of course, we've added on the layer of sanitation. Can you discuss with us about the President's Safe Initiative and what it has actually now catalyzed within the DBE's approach to the issue around sanitation and within that value chain that now relates to healthcare, nutrition, as well as the overall care of the young people in your custody on a daily basis?
So, if you look at South Africa's education system, I mean, one of the key achievements post-94 is that we've been able to give access to children. So South Africa at the moment, at primary school level, we've got almost universal enrollment. So almost all of our children in the primary school phase up to about 15 years of age do attend school. It drops off slightly in the secondary school phase. But one of the key challenges that we confront is that we haven't broken through in terms of improving the quality of education. Even though over the last 10 years in particular, a lot of the international tests that we participate in have shown that we've made great strides, we come off a very low base. And so the quality challenge remains. Now, one of the key things that impact on children accessing school or continuing to go to school and improving quality is that they've got to attend regularly. And there are various reasons why children in South Africa do not attend school regularly. And there are four main reasons, and I would just like to refer to each one of them very, very briefly. So the first reason is they get upper respiratory tract infections, colds and flus, generally. Then the second one is diarrhea. Children don't come to school because they've got diarrhea. The third one is something that is also very close to my heart, and something that I think in South Africa we need to do a lot more around, is that it's road accidents. In South Africa, you know, unlike what some of our partners think, most of our children actually walk to school. They live within a distance where they can walk to school. They get involved in car accidents, a major reason for staying at home. And the fourth one is intestinal worms, right? Now, out of the 4 that I've just mentioned, 3 are directly linked to sanitation. 3 of those reasons why children in South Africa do not come to school, 3 of those reasons are directly linked to sanitation. And so sanitation actually lies at the heart of a good quality education. If you are to improve the quality of education, oddly, you actually need to start focusing on sanitation. And so, I mean, I was very moved when Anele spoke earlier. And I mean, I think it's a travesty that in this day and age we should come here and admit that children has fallen into a pit latrine and died. And I think our president was so moved, you know, earlier this year when the little child died in the Eastern Cape, that the president then said, you know, called all the stakeholders together and said, look, there is not going to be another child. There is not going to be another child. And unfortunately, the pace at which government is addressing the backlog and the huge backlog that we had as a result of our history, if we continue along that pace, we run the risk of having another child fall into a pit latrine and die. And so the president then convened a set of stakeholders. I know Unilever was there, others who were in the room were there. And the president really says, I want you to move faster. But he's also admitting the limitations of government. And so he's calling on not just the corporate sector, but also civil society to say, work with us, see what we can do jointly to ensure that we address this as a matter of urgency.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Granville-Whittle, for that response. 3 out of the 4 leading factors that make sure that young people do not attend school are related to sanitation. I'm going to pose my next question to Ms. Letepu Machaba, who is the Vice President at Unilever for Home Care. Now, Letepu, as you listen to these statistics and you've partnered with the presidency as well as the Department of Basic Education on this key movement, as it were, and crisis control, Unilever has, over the years, made a number of commitments to positively impacting society as you grow as a business and you create a business that, as you say in your vision statements, is one that you would like to be proud of, but you'd like the world to be proud of. Please, can you give us an insight on what this partnership is currently taking shape, what the shape of this partnership is currently taking with your interaction with the Department of Basic Education around this particular crisis, but also where is this partnership going? So, because this is certainly not a short-term commitment on your part, but a journey between a private sector participant who knows that a public partner desperately needs their hand held.
Thanks, Lynette. So at Unilever, we talk about the USLP, which is Sustainable Living Plan.
Yes.
So to your point, this is not for us only lower paper, muloa pampiri. It's around sustainability. And the premise for this is really around everything that we do, and most of our brands have got to have a purpose, and then tackle issues in the society in a meaningful manner, because we believe as corporate, we can be a force for good. We've been humbled by this journey, because when we started this Domestos 8 years ago, we went in not actually realizing the magnitude of the challenge and the program. The good thing is, over the years, we've actually garnered partners, and the more we got people on board, the bigger the impact has been. I spoke to someone earlier on this morning, is how do you eat an elephant? You invite friends. You know, so really that is the premise of partnership, to actually ensure that there is momentum behind this, and we start a movement. If I look at the impact, when we started, we impacted around 27,000 learners. But this year with the janitor program, around maintenance, we've been actually able to go and impact even more students, around 700,000. So I think that just starts to show what can be done when we actually work in partnership with the others. With the Department of Education, we also have an opportunity to impact 15,000 schools, which is something that we've actually started. And with the janitor program that we have this year and the results that we've seen from the pilot, it means we can impact even more schools. As our firm belief is, we don't just inherit the world from our parents, we actually create the future for our children. So whatever we do today, it has to be sustainable. And the only way you can get impact and ensure the sustainability is really when you start to work with partners. So today really is the start to get thoughts and ideas that we can then take forward as part of the journey for sustainable living.
Thank you very much to you, Latupa. And I think I'd really love a little bit later on for us to discuss your particular division has actually a number of brands that create a value chain around home care. And the brands also all work together to impact on this particular problem. But also what intrigues me about what you're doing in this partnership is looking at the different stakeholders in the school environment, the janitor, the school child, and the community. And at some point, we need to have a broader discussion about how you and I, who are consumers of Unilever products in particular, really also begin to contribute to the collaborative cause that you have started. I'm going to come to UNICEF, and good morning to you, Sanjay. Sanjay, please articulate the correct pronunciation of your surname.
It's Vijay Sekar, so it's kind of phonetic.
Vijay Sekar.
Sekara, yeah.
Right. I did not want to butcher it for those purposes. But thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sanjay is the country director for UNICEF right here in South Africa. And the World Toilet Day, as I've already explained, is a United Nations development program observation of this particular day. And therefore, UNICEF works quite closely with its offices right the way around the world in making sure that as far as possible, that number that I expressed of just billions of people around the world who do not have access to sanitation is driven down. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals also brings together not just leaders, but civic society in making sure that by 2030, we have achieved access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all. 2030, Sanjay, is not far. Mm-hmm. And the number and the elephants, the size of the elephant you are tackling is simply massive. What do your commitments, and particularly the commitments and policy that you drive through world governments, mean to the private sector and a society's individuals, such as you and perhaps your panel guest as well as our guest today? How do we whittle down the complexity of the policy and the governance that the UN drives and make it into actionable and catalytic actions in the societies we live in?
Okay, how long do we have for that one then? Thank you very much, and and first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel and to be here today. It's a great privilege, and I've worked with many of you in many different forms in the past, and hopefully will continue to do so. As you say, in terms of the United Nations, and one of our roles that we as UNICEF do together with our colleagues in WHO is to monitor the progress of these goals across the world. And we just recently brought out, if you like, a baseline almost of the wash in schools situation globally. And it's very interesting because it actually does match. I mean, if you like, South Africa is a microcosm of the world, kind of at both ends of the spectrum, which is what Anela was also referring to in her moving talk. So there are 600 million children across the world who don't have access to sanitation in schools, and also across the world, something like 1 in 5 primary schools and 1 in 8 secondary schools don't have sanitation services. And it gets even worse if you look at kind of hand washing, which is also critical. So in some ways, so you can see that South Africa fits somewhere there, and if you actually disaggregate it, probably fits across the whole, the whole spectrum. I think the question you're kind of asking is around how do we break that into bite-sized pieces, and work together to kind of tackle the kind of elephant in the room. And I think for us, you know, our commitment is very clear. It is, you know, it is first and foremost supporting the countries, the governments of the countries to internalize those ambitions, which South Africa has done very well. So it's clear what is there to be achieved and what the kind of targets are, and then a lot of the information like the 4,000 or 3,800 schools and so on that have immediate needs. I think the other elements are to tackle the more complex bits, which require all of us to come together with very specific roles. So, for example, what we propose to do, and we have done, is to try and bring together the different players. So, following up on from the President's breakfast, where he convened the private sector and corporates and others, and effectively said, look, we're all in this together. I'm really pleased that here in South Africa, a lot of the corporates have come together to kind of provide a consolidated offer. So we can all do little bits, and sometimes the little bits, well-intentioned as they are, don't add up to the whole. However, across the corporates, there's a whole range of expertise that address lots of different parts of the sanitation chain, from whether it's procurement, to whether it's technologies, to whether it's supplies, to whether it's operation and maintenance like the janitors. There's a whole range of solutions that can be brought together, and if packaged, then that creates a really good offer for the country at scale, because we do need scale. For the tragic reasons that we mentioned, and that we don't have time. So we've got to really force the pace on this, because, you know, one child is one child too many.
Sure. Sanjay, I love the point that you have stretched with us today around sometimes to address at scale, you've got to look at who is addressing it, the stakeholders in that particular realm, and how do we rather pull together perhaps the unseen resources, knowledge, skills, and capacity first before we pull together the products, the services, and the solutions to the top layer. Thank you. And as I leave that thought, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Mafoko, a gentleman, ladies and gentlemen, who probably feels some of the hardest questions in the country today around this particular crisis, but boldly and courageously so. You know, whether it's in Parliament or to the media. Now, you're the Chief Director of the Department of Basic Education's Infrastructure Directorate. And that directorate is the directorate that is in the firing line, really, around this particular crisis. We've had your colleague, Dr. Granville Whittle, talk through what the SAFE initiative means within the department holistically. But I really want to delve into some of the nitty-gritty around some of the infrastructure challenges you face and why these conditions exist. Now, many of us, particularly in the built environment, know that ASIDI, for instance, was launched in 2011, which was specifically to look at the issue of school infrastructure, including sanitation as a pillar within the context of that. But as we now move forward, the department has had the opportunity to properly audit where the shortages exist and or where facilities don't exist at all. And you've made a number of recommendations that have been put on the table now to begin to look at how do we aggressively accelerate the pace of service delivery related to the issues at hand. Some of the things that we've seen suggested by the department include the role of the implementing agencies as well as fees that are currently paid to consultants who are on the outside of your sphere. We've heard that the department intends to demolish all the pit latrines, or at least to some great extent, in order to ensure that they are replaced with proper sanitation, particularly as you look into the 2019-2020 financial year. We've also heard National Treasury come to the party and reprioritize the funding around this process and project in the most recent medium-term budget speech. And we've now looked at saying, you know, there's currently about 950 projects that you're running with, and there was a success report around the pace and the completion of those projects, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, and the Eastern Cape, where this crisis is really at its height and its peak. As you now look forward and you make these particular adjustments, how do you strike a balance between the competing demand to address this crisis, the lack of capacity, which the department has spelled out to us internally to get the necessary work and rollouts done, dwindling budgets, because National Treasury has reprioritized the budget and taken money from elsewhere that's also required to accelerate this particular project, which will then impact on the maintenance planning and going into the future. And then, of course, everybody's saying, what are you doing about this crisis and the heat that follows it? How do you as a department, when you get up in the morning and you go to work, how do you balance just these competing interests on a daily basis? And when you go to your desk, what is your chief priority amongst all of these burning issues?
Yeah, when people chose easy jobs, some of us just decided to take the most difficult ones. You know, when the president made his speech on the 14th of August, he made one very important point, that, you know, we always tend to chase numbers. And certainly with us in the build industry, we tend to say, how many schools have you built? How many toilets have you built? And those kind of things. And the president said, we must forget about what we have done and concentrate on what you have not done. And that's when the penny dropped to say, look, we have been reporting that since the dawn of democracy, we have built X number of schools. We had 16,000 schools without sanitation, but what is important is how many children still don't have access to those services. And that is what is keeping us awake at this point in time, that you have the 3,800 schools that still use pit toilets. You still have about 2,000 schools where proper sanitation was provided, but they were not demolished. You still have schools that need additional sanitation facilities. You need to provide for grade R learners. You need to provide for your disabled learners. In this instance, maybe to answer your question, sanitation is our most important priority as we speak. Of course, there are other competing priorities. We have to provide new facilities. Everybody's coming to Gauteng. We have to find budget to address the influx of people into Gauteng and other provinces. We've got storm damages, especially around December. We still have to find money to do that. But sanitation, for now, is our biggest priority. And with the prioritization exercise that you spoke about, for the current financial year, for instance, we have managed to get a budget of around 2.7 billion only for sanitation, and we will be increasing it to around 3 billion for the next financial year to address this particular challenge. However, that is still not sufficient. You know, if you look at the numbers that we have to deal with, that is still not sufficient. And these kinds of partnerships are very, very important to us. That is why we had to leave everything that we are doing to come here to assist and also implore people to come to the party and assist us in addressing this big challenge. As the colleague has said, that you bring your friends along. That's a new twist to this one. You bring your friends along to eat an elephant. We definitely need a lot of friends to assist us in eating this elephant. You know, the truth of the matter, and we cannot shy away from it, is that if you look at some of the conditions that we are looking at, it's just a matter of when we hear that another child has fallen into the toilet, and we cannot afford that. So we need all the hands on deck to assist us in addressing this matter as quickly as possible. The partnerships that we expect to come out of these initiatives, and we have been having quite a lot of that. Your Water Research Commission has been working with us in terms of coming up with different technologies to assist in taking the prices and the costs down, and as well as making sure that we deliver with speed. That is.
Thank you very much to you, Mr. Mafoko, for that response. No doubt, just such a challenging space to be in. And perhaps as we reflect on what you've just pointed out to us around accelerating service delivery and that very crucial statement that you made, that it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when, in many instances, that this could occur again. I perhaps would like to bring it back to your two colleagues closest to me and say to them both, so it seems South Africa has both the policy framework, has various arms of government, civil society, business and partners playing together, has a lot of support from internal as well as external agencies. If there were two magic wand priorities to assist that gentleman's cause right now as he balances fire, what would those two priorities be within this framework that already exists to make sure that these services are delivered in as short a time period as we need to mitigate this when? Any one of you can tackle it.
So
if there were two things he woke up and did, what would those two magic wand actions do?
So the one thing Solly was referring to was the 2,000 schools where we've got proper sanitation, but we didn't have the pits demolished. And that to me seems like one of those calls that we can make to companies that work in the space to provide us with, because in this case it's probably labor and somebody, and Solly will explain this, and you need a slab to just close it off. Because in both cases, the child in Limpopo and the child in the Eastern Cape, they actually fell into disused pits. So these are schools that generally have been built by communities. As the department, we go in and provide proper sanitation, but the community then says partly because of the difficulties of a consistent water supply, they then say, look, we understand that you've given us, but we don't want to demolish this because at some point in the future we're going to need those pits. And so those pits are unsafe. And part of what we're doing now is to send people, into communities to go and have these meetings in communities and explain to them that, actually, you've got to ensure that this, is addressed. So that's my one. The second one, I think, is, again, the point about partnerships. If colleagues can stand up like you're doing here and say, I give 5,000 and I give 2,000, we hosted a similar breakfast, and I know Luco is not going to be too upset with me for mentioning because it's not a competitor, I think. So it was hosted by Vodacom.
Yes.
And Vodacom, the person that did the vote of thanks, he said, I've just, as the 5 children that my mother had, we decided, because my mother, as a family, we never owned our own house. And as a family, they then decided they were going to build a house for their mother in King Williamstown. Unfortunately, at that time, their dad had passed. And they built 5 toilets in the house. 5, right? And he then said, he's challenging all the Vodacom colleagues that were in the room to say, if you have more than 1 toilet in your house, if you have more than one, for each extra one, you must give 500 Rand. And he said before the end of the day, they had raised in Vodacom more than 250,000 Rand, which was enough for them to renovate a set of toilets in a school in King Williamstown. And I think that really is the challenge to all of us as South Africans. I met a colleague of ours who's doing a lot of work with us in the DBE. And I said to him, we really want your company to come on board. And his response was, yes, my company, but I also want to contribute. And that's really the challenge, I think, that one wants to put to, not just to the audience, but to South Africans in general. What can I do to help?
All right. Sanjay, did you have a thought?
Yes,
Okay.
if I may. So if there are two things, I think the one big one is the operation and maintenance. And a lot of the pictures, and just drawing on my experience across the world, the one thing that is really sad that you do see is there are lots of toilets in schools that just aren't working. And the investment has been made, the capital investment has been made, it's just not working. It's not being used. It's not a service. So we, again, we like to look at things as a service rather than just the facility. So, and it's not something that you first build and then you think about operation and maintenance. And it's directly relevant because it isn't just about a problem later on. It's directly relevant because as your, if you like, capital stock of infrastructure grows, the operation and maintenance is what brings it back down. And it would be a real tragedy if, again, in a couple of years' time, we're in the same situation. It also has a big impact on budgets. So we're fighting to get funding for infrastructure, and it's fantastic that South Africa is making that available. But at the same time, we've got to make that count. Otherwise, we'll be back again, and it's very, very expensive. So operation and maintenance systems, and then accountabilities, and from what Granville said earlier on, for a head teacher, for someone in the school system, arguably, a functioning toilet is as relevant as whether the capacity of the teachers to teach or the quality of the teaching, because they are part of the quality of the whole education package. So I think that's a really key element to focus on.
And as I wind down our panel's questions, I'm going to jump just really based on Granville's point to you, Anele. As private individuals, South Africa is a country laden with issues and challenges and problems. And I'm pretty sure that in the space you're in, people bring them dime a dozen. Every single day, somebody needs help. An active citizenry, though, is something that we all aspire to, but perhaps the most difficult thing to get involved in. You've taken this journey with Domestos and many other previous journeys before. What do you look for in a project that you support? And when it starts to, when it gets to, let's hit the road, let's let the, the rubber hit the tar, as it were, around activating yourself as an individual, where do you go in yourself to galvanize yourself to keep committed to a partnership and a path? Because I think a lot of people who are sitting in the audience today feel something about what we're discussing, but are not sure if bangathumeka to do anything about it. So where do you go in yourself as an active citizen to say, okay, I can, where do I start, what can I do?
Initially, when I think to myself that I'm going to do something, I always pick to do something that doesn't require anything besides myself, right? So at times, something just needs your presence. Can you please attend this? We're raising money for that. Now, that doesn't need money, that doesn't need banking. It just needs for me to go to a place and to be there just so that my presence can support. That's the first thing. And then secondly, it's also, it has to have longevity, because also I don't want to fix something and then next week it's broken again, or next week you have to do it again. When it's generational, because I believe that something like this, we'll build the toilets and then education is easier, which means that more kids get education, less kids drop out. And also more kids have got a sense of confidence when they're entering a space like university. University is one thing when you're saying we need to raise school fees, fees must fall. But you don't understand the mind frame that you need to stay in university. You need a tenacity and a confidence that can only be built by where you come from. Now, if where you come from pales in comparison to the kids sitting next to you with the best calculator, the best bag, park their car outside, wearing the best clothes, if where you come from it's such an issue for you, even before you go and write that test, you already feel like you haven't won. You've already given up. So for me, if it's something that can make you go further a lot further. And one day I'll run into you and you know you're doing groceries with your kids and you say, Yazin Anele, one day I asked you to do this for me and you didn't. Here I am. Then immediately I jump in when I can see the end point. And the end point is one of another beginning where then you can then, you know, do something for somebody else. If my end is another beginning, I'm in.
Paying it forward
Yes.
in the truest sense
Yeah.
of the word. Thank you so much for that insight and reflection, Anele. My final question this morning for our panel to our host, and really to say to you, you've heard the dynamics here today, Letupa, and how the organizations, the frameworks exist, how the challenges all come together, and it's really about joining the dots. Now, you know, Unilever as a business, your division as well as its products, as businesses and individual businesses within that, have made specific commitments and support quite a number of initiatives to move and go forward. But really to pick off Sanjay's point around capacity and the janitor program that you touched on, I love that you've moved from the product to the people who use the end user, as it were, and their interaction with how they go forward. Moving forward, as you now look at particularly the operations, the maintenance, and the sustainability question, the janitor program was in pilots this year. Where does it go to now? And a little bit later on, we're going to talk about educators and school principals and how they fall into that framework as well. But I really want to ask you, where do we go now with the janitor program, and where do we go with the rest of the stakeholders in the school environment in relation to what you are driving now as initiatives as you look at the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years as Unilever as a business?
Okay. I think I'll just start by saying, where do we go with the World Toilet Day awareness as a start? Because I think today is really around raising awareness, having the conversations, and then encouraging active participation. If you look at just what happened this morning, within a group of very few people, we're then able to get some action. So for me, if we do that and we get action out of it, then we're starting to win. We're starting to win the battle. Where do we go with Domestos and the program? The good thing for Domestos is this is not a campaign that we're doing, but it's part of the brand's purpose to actually improve access to sanitation for children and people around the world. So it's not extra hard work, but it's something that is core to the brand and that we can continue to do. We've been on the journey, like I said, for the last 8 years, and this is not a flash in the plan, I'll repeat, but it's something that we'll do for as long as the challenge remains. And the good thing with the partnership is that it'll enable us to have even bigger impact. The program, the janitor program, for those who may not be aware, is really a program around maintenance. Because it's one thing to have the infrastructure or to not have the infrastructure, but it's another to maintain that infrastructure. So the program grows into schools. So this year we touched over 200 schools where we educate people who actually clean the toilets. We educate the principals and the schools so then they can maintain the program. What I can safely say is this is also audited. So we don't just go in there and say we're doing this and then we walk away. We start with the state of the program, we maintain throughout, and then we've seen some fantastic results actually coming out of that. The plan and the hope is with the consolidations of the conversation we have over the next 48, 72 hours, we can then roll that out to more schools next year. As I mentioned, we have now access to 15,000 learners, and the aim is all grade 1 students will go through health and hygiene program through all the public schools. So now imagine with 15,000 schools, why can we not actually roll that out and do that more? And then in closing, I had a very interesting conversation with a professor from Limpopo this morning who said we really need to get our sanitation, our health, innovation, and technology solutions together. Let me repeat that. Sanitation, hygiene, and innovative technology, so offering all sort of solutions to this problem. In summary, he said we need to get our shit together.
Yeah.
Sanitation, health, innovation, and technology. So it's like, get that all together, because unless we start to having these conversations very openly, we will never get to the solution.
I absolutely love that acronym because it gets to the crux of the matter. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to get our shit together. Thank you to my panel. I will open the floor for 2 questions. I've got time for 2 questions before we carry on with our program today. My roving mics are already at the back. And whilst they make their way to the 2 questions, I see 2 hands in the dark. I would at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, like to extend the apologies of the Minister of Basic Education, Ms. Mochega, this morning. We have been advised by the ministry that she has fallen ill and is not available today, but has sent her well wishes and continued support and commitment to this program, which is evidenced by her colleagues who are here with us this morning to continue this engagement and carry this commitment through and forward. But the program will continue notwithstanding. To the 2 questions from the floor, please, if the microphones are there. The ladies and the gents, thank you very much. If you can please just stand up, tell us
Hi,
who
guys.
you are, and pose your question to a
Hi
member
guys,
of
this
the
is
panel.
Tebogo. So I have a statement, a comment, and a question. Ne?
So, Tebogo, for time purposes,
I'll
I
be
need
short.
you to ask the question.
Okay, my
Thank
question is, how do we, because Anele tackled the issue of poverty, ne? How do we speak of poverty where else most of the people who are affected are not in the space, 1. Then 2, how do we host such an event in a place where sanitation is good? But then I think we should, next time when this flash forum is about to happen, we should try hosting it ekasi, where most people can engage in the issue of sanitation. Ne? Then the other one, I would suggest that Domestos should actually not concentrate on improving sanitation at schools, but then it should also try improving sanitation in the community, because now most of the people who are buying the product are people from our households, you understand? So it's just a suggestion for future purposes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much to you, Tebogo. So, Tebogo, members of the panel, and perhaps Lethubi, you are nodding to say you can tackle it. Poverty, and looking at, of course, its impacts and the global value chain that relates to sanitation. If you can take that. If I can perhaps have the second question. I don't know where my roving mic has gone. Oh, there it is. And then we can just address them as a set. It's on. It is on.
Oh, hello everyone. I seem to rise many times. Last week, Statistics South Africa released very worrying statistics that 1 in every 5 South African is in dire poverty. And these are households. And what I was suggesting, and it's good, Madam there said we need to incorporate sanitation, health, innovation, and technology. Everything turns all together. One thing I would say is, if a homestead in Soweto is having those old toilets, do we demolish them to make them small? Or do we have an innovation in such a way that water can be saved? And then also...
can I interrupt you for the sake of time? We need a question, ma'am.
Yes.
Statements we can do later. We've got lots of time during the workshop to work through them. But do you have a question for any member of the panel at this time?
Yes, I have 2 questions for you.
Please select one question that you will ask.
Question to Unilever.
Okay.
Would they consider CSR to incorporate innovative products to their employees who are actually in the bracket of the poor, to having water saving mechanisms so that there is no service delivery protests back home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Letebo, both questions
Yeah,
for your direct attention,
Yes,
ma'am. Over
not
to
a
you.
problem. Yeah. So let me start with the first one that speaks to poverty. Absolutely. This whole issue of sanitation, if we're able to solve for it, we're able to bring dignity to the poorest of the poorest. What I will state is in the last 8 years when we've done this program, all the toilets that we've renovated are in the township. That's the first start. And all the events that we had on World Toilet Days have always been in the township. I think today was just the first time where because we can't keep taking it there. Everyone else must be aware of this issue and help in whatever way that they can. If Anele can help as one citizen, someone else as corporate. So for me, it's just where we take the issue and the awareness. So that is the one biggest challenge. If I look at the janitor program this year, we've taken it to schools in the Eastern Cape and in KwaZulu-Natal, where the need is the biggest. Let me explain why schools are important and critical. We firmly believe, at least our family believe, that if you educate one child in a school, they go home, and they can educate 3, 4 others at home. So it really isn't only about let's build toilets for the poorest of the poor, but let us educate on health and wellness, and let us also maintain through advocacy and bringing products. I think we'd be very naive if we think that as Domestos we're going to solve all the sanitation problems of South Africa. It would be very silly. But what we can do is lean in and elicit the support of other partners to ensure that we have impact. I think that helps to answer where we stand. But like I said, this is core to everything that we do as a business. The second question that you had was around, should we not consider some CSI initiative? As a business, we really believe in sustainable living programs. So a few years ago, we really moved away from corporate social initiative, because it really isn't a campaign that we do. It's really founded at the heart of Unilever as Lever Brothers, where it was founded with a product like Lifebuoy that went on to say, we will innovate a soap that actually helps us to get rid of germs. And that has been the philosophy over the years, which we have proven that if there's clear purpose and there's a clear plan, you're able to impact, and also you're able to have an impact on the bottom line. So that's something that we fundamentally believe in. So we don't necessarily do CSI, but we believe in USLP. Having said that, the purpose of today and the next 72 hours is really to get thoughts and ideas to build on what we've already started, so there can be a movement. So certainly that's the whole point of the workshop later on today, to try and get ideas and thoughts on some of the things that we can do to take this initiative forward with impact and speed.
All right. Thank you very much for those responses. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion this morning, looking at sanitation success. And I'd like to thank my panel guests for not only their openness and transparencies to the challenges that are faced in this particular space, but I think for each of us, we've received some valuable information about some of the issues they are working through, some of the case studies, as well as best practice that is currently being engaged at looking at this crisis in South Africa, but right the way around the world. Please give them all a very warm round of applause. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, you may work your way back to your seats. Thank you very much. Oh, we'd like to take a quick picture with the panel guests, please. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst they have a media moment, which I'm being invited into, please continue with sharing. Thank you very much to our panel guests. Oh, one more. Panel guests, my apologies for this one. Thank you very much. And as they make their way back to their seats this morning, Thank you to everyone who is participating in the online dialogue in relation to what we are all here to engage on and discuss. And thank you to the questions again to the floor, because I think they allow us to interrogate some of the thinking that goes behind not only hosting a forum and the workshops of this nature, but also some of the thinking around where we will seek the answers that we need to address and respond to the crisis effectively from. So thank you to the members of the audience who are giving us some food for thought today. At this point in time, I'd like to call up to the stage Mr. Luco McKay, and he is going to give us an address from Unilever, who are our hosts today, and who have contributed so greatly to the conversation, as well as the content and the case studies that you and I are interacting at scale, as well as in the different organizations that Unilever has chosen to partner with. Please give him a very warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Lynette. Thank you very much, good afternoon, everyone. Great pleasure. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Annele, thank you very much for, I would say, hosting us in a way, and for creating a movement about raising funds, which is capital in what we want to do today. So I'm going to start, by saying an announcement where, thanks to the start of your movement, we've already raised 780,000 rands. So as I don't like figures when it's not a rounded figures. I personally going to put the 20,000 rands additional to make it 800,000. So really, thank you very much to everyone. I think, was a very important morning, very serious morning, and I would like to acknowledge and thanks all the panelists for joining us, for the very relevant key insights that you've been giving. I love these African proverbs. So just let's make sure we don't eat elephants. They are so beautiful in the nature. And I will not mention the last one, but let's put our shit together. Yes, we can say it. No, I think, Unilever is absolutely committed. And once again, Letepu said it all. We don't do CSR. We do sustainability, because we believe that sustainability is what lasts longer. When 10 years ago, Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever, said that the world in which we were living couldn't continue and couldn't last like that. We needed to act, and that's when we've launched the Unilever Sustainability Living Plan, for which we want today to have every Unilever brand with a very strong sense of purpose and acting. And I think that what Domestos has been doing since then is quite commendable. All these training, the importance about proper hygiene and sanitation. But is that enough? It's not enough. While we were having the panel discussion, at the same time, 60 kids under the age of 5 died in that same period of time around the globe for diarrhea issues. 60 kids. And we live in a world where, yes, in South Africa in the 21st century, a child can die by falling in a pit latrine. I'm personally involved in the school program, which I'm going to mention again, that we put together, and I visit a lot of schools. And the first thing that I do is to go and visit the toilets of the schools. And what Annele has been experiencing on her iPad, it's the reality of every day for millions of children in South Africa. That needs to stop. We need to bring back dignity for our kids in school. We need to bring back that dignity with all sense of urgency. So yes, Unilever in June 2017, we signed a partnership with the Department of Basic Education around a schools program, a behavior change program, and that is why it's sustainability. Behavior change program about the importance of proper hygiene, sanitation, to reduce absenteeism at school. And Dr. Granville explained very well all these issues why the kids are missing school. So it's all about, proper hygiene, washing your hands with a brand like Lifebuoy, proper maintenance of the toilets with Domestos, or proper oral hygiene with Mentadent. But on top of that, Domestos went with that janitor program. Maintenance of the toilets is very critical. What we see is you can have a proper infrastructure, but if the toilets are not properly maintained, is this a place where the kids are going to go with dignity? No, they will not go. They will not have the proper hygiene, and they will continue dying from diarrhea. We need to act. We need to act by changing the infrastructure. Our commitment is to make sure that these roughly 60,000 schools, public schools in South Africa, have, as quickly as possible, the proper infrastructure and the proper maintenance with this janitor program which help the maintenance of the toilets. The prime is not to define if yes or no we're going to achieve it. We need to achieve it. The prime is a question of time. By when? What is the roadmap? And while, last year, for that Toilet World Day, we were in a school, actually. We were in a school where a school completely renovated by Domestos, beautiful toilets. And we said, what are we going to do this year? Do we continue to go in another school? Could have been an idea. But the problem is, Domestos cannot do everything on its own. And what is important is partnership. That's the SDG number 17. And that's what we need today in order to act with all sense of urgency. We need that strong partnership. And I really would like, obviously, to commend the SAFE program from the government with the input of the president. I would like to commend as well the WASH CEO network initiative from UNICEF. Because this is about bringing together some partners like Jojo Tank, like Envirosan, that we saw the presentation earlier. And we need more, and we need fundings. I was in London last week, where I engaged the global team of Unilever, explaining the crisis in which South Africa was in terms of the needs, urgent need of infrastructure. I cannot do any commitment today, but what we committed is Unilever is going to activate all its network with NGOs, with the private sector, to address very quickly the problem of infrastructure and maintenance of the school, to make sure we act on these targeted 60,000 schools very quickly. So we're probably going to come back by the months of February or March with clearly plans and roadmap about what we're going to do. And obviously, UNICEF and this WASH CEO network will be entirely part of it. But it's really time to act all together. So I'm personally very proud of what Domestos has been doing, very proud of all of you who participate about raising funds, because that's what we need. That's what we need. In order to change the infrastructure, we need to raise funds and we need to act quickly. So with all the key partners, that's what we're going to do. So once again, I really want to thank each and everyone for joining us this morning. we're going to move to some workshop after, and that workshop needs to be very concrete. While I'm very proud for Domestos to have changed, 27 toilets in school, it's only 27. And it's not enough. It's not enough, and we need to act quicker. And we can do that only with partnership. So please, spread the voice around you to raise more awareness, to raise funds, and we're going to come with a concrete plan about how we're going to address that infrastructure issue. So thank you very much, and I think it's time to, in these 210 schools where we've done the janitor program. The great thing is we've been monitoring the impact of this janitor program. And again, it's a behavior change program where teachers, principals of the schools, and kids have been involved in terms of having the proper maintenance of the toilets of their schools, making sure that every child can go to the toilet with the dignity they deserve. And I'm going to invite, on behalf of the Minister of Department of Basic Education, I'm going to invite Dr. Granville to join me, where we're going to award and the schools who have been exemplary and went the extra miles in terms of the proper maintenance of the school and embracing this change program. Thank you, everyone.
Good. The certificates are right here beneath you. I'll announce them and then hand them back to you. So if I can use the same sets of certificates, thank you very much. Can I have the first one? Ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard in the address you've just listened to, we're recognizing the efforts of ordinary South Africans today who are all stakeholders in this crisis, who go above and beyond the call of duty in their day-to-day tasks to make sure that they alleviate the crisis around sanitation in the schools and communities they find themselves in, but also contribute to increasing and engendering the values of dignity in our society today. Sometimes we look for heroes dressed in capes with great big giant wings and perhaps halos around them too. And sometimes these heroes and angels are in plain sight. And there are people in our communities who don't often get the recognition for the work that they do. And so today, Unilever felt that this was incredibly important to ensure that we achieve this recognition and also to help us incentivize and excite others that you can make a change with what you have and where you are. So the first person this morning we would like to recognize, we will play the video first. Okay, we're going to start with our videos first. A very warm round of applause for the people who are making a difference and make it happen under often very, very difficult circumstances. You earlier on heard Ms. Letepu Mashaba discuss that they went back into the schools as part of the janitor program and audited whether maintenance was continuing and whether the conditions at the schools were still being maintained. So these are the people that we're recognizing today who take their learning, put it into their maintenance plans, and make it happen around the country today. So the first person this afternoon we'd like to recognize is Mr. Emmanuel Sibusiso Makoba for his contribution to the health and well-being of South African learners by promoting hygienic sanitation practices and supporting the national schools' hygiene certificate of recognition goes to Mr. V.I. Guahu. To the representatives from the schools that have come up. And my final batch goes to recognize Pumi Kumalo, Edwina Manaso, Selina Mosia. I don't want to award recipients this afternoon, and thank you very much to both Luca and Granville for those presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like for you to train your eyes to the stage at this point in time. Earlier on, you will have seen as you came into this morning's event some videos, and with young people who are singing the pledge song, as well as young people who are talking about their experiences of sanitation in their schools. So we've got a few very special visitors joining us this morning to teach us something new. Are they ready? Please, can you welcome them to the stage, ladies and gentlemen?